Welcome, weary YouTube traveler. You have stumbled into the dark and creepy Tales Crypt. Now that you're trapped, welcome here. Why not make yourself comfortable? Grab a drink, a snack, and a whip. No, not that kind of whip, a work in progress whip. And sit down with me while I tell you a story. Tonight's tale concerns a house. But not just any house. This house is a mystery house. The Winchester Mystery House, to be exact. What's so special about this house? What makes it a mystery? Or rather, who made it a mystery? To understand the house, we first need to understand the person who built it. This vast, sprawling mansion is located in San Jose, California, and dates back to 1886. It is set among lush gardens and is primarily infamous for the bizarre architectural features that greet visitors brave enough to come inside. Staircases lead nowhere, doors placed where they open into brick walls, and windows that look into everything and nothing. But the Mystery House, which opened its doors to the public 100 years ago, is also famous for the apparent strangeness of its Victorian creator. This house, like no other, was the home and brainchild of one Sarah Winchester, the widowed heiress to one of the biggest, most successful weapons manufacturers of the time, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Most of us have heard some version of the story. According to legend, Sarah was motivated to build a home with such odd features because a psychic medium told her that the ghosts of those killed by the Winchester rifle would haunt her until the day she died unless she went out west to build a house with room for all of them. In another version, we're told that a psychic medium told her that she must move out west and build a labyrinth of a house to hide in, or else the ghosts would find her and kill her. In other versions, we hear a similar story, but that if she ever stopped constructing, even for 1 minute, the ghosts would come and take her life. Supporting the assertion that Sarah Winchester was superstitious and crazy, she had an apparent love for the number 13, which is strewn throughout the house in the architecture itself and in the decorations, designs, and even useful features. Chandeliers are grouped in 13s, their bathrooms are grouped in 13s, there are little coat hooks in 13 groupings, and wardrobes always got to be 13 in the area. Everything she put in the house somehow related to or was grouped around or featured the number 13. Many, quote, experts claim that this mansion is the most haunted house in the entire United States. An eccentric widow, heir to an American rifle fortune, is tortured by the horrors wrought by the weapon. She becomes convinced only building a labyrinth house will keep her safe, and if construction stops, the spirits will find and kill her, like it did the rest of her family. The result of her delusion is the Winchester Mystery House, a monument to madness, or so they say. So, let's talk about some statistics and facts about this house. It stands at 24,000 square feet. Take a look around your room. Think about your house. The size. 24,000 square foot home. It has 160 plus rooms. This mansion boasts 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 stairways, 17 chimneys, and 13 bathrooms. In today's money, the Winchester Mystery House's construction costs would have totaled over $71 million. Let that sink in for just a minute. This labyrinth mystery house, totally dysfunctional and confusing, a maze with traps and dead ends and all of these crazy superstitious features, would have cost someone $71 million in today's money and 24,000 square feet of what's largely a dysfunctional house that is not really fluid in its construction and arguably to some largely unlivable. As a commercial tourist attraction today, much is made of the Winchester Mystery House's innate spookiness. And when you're inside it, on one of the house's daily public tours, it feels plausible that this mansion was designed by someone who perhaps wasn't fully operating on this astral plane. But to understand the house and how it came to be, we really do need to understand the human behind the legend, Sarah Winchester. The Winchester Mystery House is a mansion in San Jose, California, that was once the personal residence of Sarah Winchester, the widow of firearms magnate William Wirt Winchester. The house became a tourist attraction less than 9 months after Sarah Winchester's death in 1922. The Victorian and Gothic style mansion is renowned for its size and its architectural curiosities, and for the numerous myths and legends surrounding the structure and its former owner. The house is located at 525 South Winchester Boulevard, San Jose, California, and it was constructed between 1884 and 1906. The architect listed is Sarah Winchester herself. The square footage is over 24,000 square feet, and some architectural styles included in the house have been identified as Victorian, Gothic, and Queen Anne style architecture. Before we get into the story of how this house came to be about, I'd like to share with you my personal experience with this house. As many of you know, I did live in California for nearly a decade. And while I was there, I was less than an hour and a half from the Winchester Mystery House. So, of course, on one of our occasions to go to the San Francisco Bay Area, I did take Leah to the Winchester Mystery House. We thought it would be a fun tour. Now, I will show you pictures of what the house started like back when it was bought by Sarah Winchester. Back then, it was largely a country property, undeveloped land way outside of any kind of town, and it was a farm property. The house was, I believe, like 8-room little ranch style house with 45 acres surrounding it, which Miss Winchester bought and started building. But today that 24,000 square foot monstrosity of a mansion is now in the center of a largely highly populated area, and we were excited to go see this mystery house we had heard so much about, and we had seen the pictures on the website and all kinds of footage. But imagine, our dismay when GPS is taking us to what I would call a rundown, dirty, kind of sketchy part of town. And I was like, we must be going somewhere wrong, because how is this beautiful, sprawling estate and mansion, huge property in the dead center of a very rundown, crime-ridden area of San Jose? But GPS did not lie. It took us right there. It was really sad to see that what was once a sprawling country vista is now a tourist attraction in the middle of a really poorly kept area. And when we showed up and went there, our excitement started draining a little bit because it was an area we were not comfortable in. Upon entering the parking lot, actually, we entered the property, entered the parking lot, and we're trying to navigate the parking lot and find a spot. I was concentrating on, not hitting people and cars that were traversing the lot. Leah was looking around, taking in the sights, and she noticed something right off the bat that I didn't. And the joke around here, and it's not really a joke, is that I almost got us killed. Uh, yeah. So while focusing on driving through this parking lot, Leah had looked around and noticed that there was someone breaking into one of the parked vehicles in this secure lot, and I did not notice this. I turned down an aisle to find a parking spot, and she starts hollering at me, "No, Mom, back up. Don't go that way. Turn around." And I'm like, what is the problem? I don't see. I'm looking for somebody that I'm about to hit. I'm looking for a car backing out of a spot that I didn't see. I'm not looking for people breaking into a van. And she's like, "No, Mom, they're breaking into a vehicle. Look." And I look up and I made eye contact with one of the people breaking into the van. They were busting out the windows. They were trying to pry open the doors. And we made eye contact, and I was like, uh-oh. Luckily, I was able to back up and drive further away in the parking lot from them. They got spooked and hopped in their car and took off, and we were able to safely go inside the actual mystery house and report the crime that we had seen. And they did call the police to come out and take a report and locate the owner of the vehicle. But even in the Winchester Mystery House's enclosed, secure, air quote, parking lot, the crime there, people were taking advantage of the fact that tourists and visitors were coming and they were out there breaking into cars while people were touring the house. If that tells you what kind of neighborhood the Winchester Mystery House now resides in. It's a very, very sad situation for such a beautiful, majestic house and property. We have toured the house, and it's unfortunate because the company that runs and manages the house as a tourist attraction today have really cheapened it. They have planted little fake sound machines and speakers to play sounds when you trigger a certain point or reach a certain point. They've over dramatized and embellished many rumors and stories as tour guides tell you these things as you go through. The house has not been well kept. It's in severe disrepair and not as fancy. It really doesn't say $71 million house with materials that reflect that cost. It was really quite disappointing. Like I said, cheapened with the sound machines and the triggered, fake moving stuff and the projector, ghosts that aren't real. It's a machine that they play. And it takes a lot of the fun and mystery out because it is so obvious what they're doing and how they've really just cheapened Sarah Winchester's memory and the house that she built, regardless of where you decide after hearing the story her mentality lies. Well, let's get back to the story at hand. Who was Sarah Winchester? Testimonies and records from those who knew her described her as intelligent, kind, a savvy financial manager, and not superstitious, remaining sharp-witted even into her old age. However, in the years since her death, she has been depicted in popular culture as guilt-ridden, mad with grief, and delirious in her later life. Sarah Winchester is depicted as superstitious and crazy. But was she? Sarah Lockwood Pardee was the fifth child born to parents Leonard and Sarah Pardee in the summer of 1839. Sarah's father was a skilled craftsman who had established a mill and woodshop called Leonard Pardee and Company. Her family had progressive ideas for the time regarding religion, philanthropic choices, publicly expressing their opinions on such things as abolition, suffrage, and animal rights. Sarah herself was described as an independent thinker who was not as social as her siblings were as teenagers. Sarah grew up with and later married her childhood friend and neighbor, William Wirt Winchester, in 1862 during the Civil War. She was 23 and he was 25. William was the son of a wealthy shirt manufacturer who would later become known for being the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Because no matter how you slice it, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company and the weapons it produced do become a major central focus of the legend and lore of the Winchester Mystery House, let's stop for a second and talk about William Winchester. So William Wirt Winchester was born on June 22nd, 1837 to parents Oliver Wirt Winchester, who was an American businessman and politician, best known as being the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arm Company, and mother Jayne Ellen Hope. William died on March 7th of 1881. William had inherited the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, where he was the treasurer and held that position until his death. This is important to the story because of the history and speculations involving this company and the Winchesters' connections to Sarah and the family she married into, the business she married into. Winchester was known for manufacturing and marketing the Winchester repeating rifle. However, the company did start off as a clothing manufacturer in New York City and New Haven, Connecticut. During this period, Oliver had discovered that there was a division of Smith & Wesson firearms that was failing financially. One of their newly patented arms was not doing so well. And having an eye for opportunity, Oliver Winchester assembled a venture capital together with other stockholders and acquired the Smith & Wesson division, better known at the time as the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company, in 1855. By 1857, Oliver Winchester had positioned himself as the principal stockholder in that company and relocated to his home in New Haven, changing the name to New Haven Arms Company. Along with taking on the Smith & Wesson firearms, he had inherited a brilliant engineer by the name of Benjamin Tyler Henry, who was an invaluable asset to the company. Henry sought to improve that volcanic repeating rifle by enlarging the frame and magazine to accommodate 17 newly designed all-brass case 44 caliber rimfire cartridges. This new cartridge put the company on the map, and Henry's ingenuity was rewarded with a patent in his name on October 16th, 1860, for what became the infamous Henry rifle. The Henry rifle was manufactured for almost 6 years, with a total production of approximately 12,000 rifles being made and sold. And following the success of the Henry rifle, the company was reorganized again and then renamed the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Repeating rifles were used to some extent in the American Civil War. However, they are most known as the guns that won the West, with thousands of rifles in the hands of the average pioneer venturing out to settle in the West. Being used in these ways, in these situations and conditions, you can imagine how many lives must have been taken by one of these rifles. And now that you have that historical link to the Winchester Company and the rifles therein and the reputation they got for being such a powerhouse weapon, let's get back to Sarah. So in June of 1966, Sarah gave birth to a baby girl, and they named the baby girl Annie Pardee Winchester in honor of William's late sister who had died during childbirth. The child suffered from a condition called marasmus and died within a month of her birth. Marasmus is a severe undernutrition condition, a deficiency in all the macronutrients that a body requires to function, including carbs, proteins, and fats. Marasmus causes visible wasting of fat and muscle under the skin, giving bodies an emaciated appearance, and it stunts growth in children. Essentially, these children's bodies are not able to absorb the carbs and proteins and nutrients it needs to survive and grow. And sadly, the Winchesters watched as their infant, over the course of the first month of her life, basically just starved to death. She wasted away in front of them, and there was nothing anyone could do. After this loss, Sarah, who was already largely considered antisocial by the standards of society at the time, spent a year in seclusive mourning, avoiding society even more than usual. Shortly thereafter, the Winchesters embraced learning about architecture and design. Architecture and design became lifelong hobbies for Sarah, who also learned about real estate investment and financial strategies from William and his father Oliver. The Winchesters built their first family home, a 20,000 square foot mansion with over 20 rooms with marble floors, decorative fireplaces and chandeliers, large bay windows, plasterwork ceilings, and a circular drive in the front. Only 3 years after the death of her daughter, in June of 1869, Sarah's father died at the age of 60, possibly from rheumatoid arthritis. 11 years later, death struck Sarah's life trifold, all within less than a year. Her mother died in May of 1880. Her father-in-law, Oliver, died in December of 1880. And then her husband, William, died from tuberculosis in March of 1881. At this point in life, Sarah was only 40 years old when her husband died. She inherited approximately $11 million and about $1,000 per day in royalties from her husband's company sales. With what was at the time, and would largely today be considered, an endless pool of money, Sarah decided to move out west. But before she could organize the move, her eldest sister died of cancer in 1884. So as you can tell, Sarah's life from age 25 to 40 was just riddled with death. She was losing family members left and right, starting with her first and only child and ending with her husband, and then her mother, her father-in-law, her father, her husband, and then her eldest sister. So this is where things start to get kind of interesting, and there are several versions of why she decided to leave the East Coast, colonial America, and move out to the West. The general version of the story, number one, is after the loss of so many family members, and after a physician recommended drier, warmer climates for her worsening rheumatoid arthritis, Winchester decided to move to California, which was touted at the time as a place with a good climate, soil, and relatively cheap land for sale. The general version of the story, number two, is that after so much death and loss, Sarah turned to spiritualism and the occult by seeking the guidance and services of mediums and psychics, holding seances and such. One such medium by the name of Adam had advised Sarah that she would be the next to die because the spirits of those killed by the Winchester guns were vengeful, and they had been the reason for the death of all the other family members. The only way she could appease them and protect herself was to build a maze or labyrinth kind of house to hide in and never stop building, not even for 1 minute, or she too would be killed by the spirits. And in the third general version of the story, Sarah descended into madness at the loss of her one and only baby, her husband, her mother, her father, her father-in-law, and her sister, such that she ran off to the opposite coast and used her endless funds to build a house that reflected her madness. Regardless of which version we choose to believe, the story continues that Sarah convinced her sisters that they should too move to California with her. What was left of her siblings and their families moved to California, where Sarah used her vast fortune to buy them all homes and support her relatives financially for the rest of their lives. Interesting side note here. Once in California, Sarah immediately established care with a physician, and that physician's name was Euthanasia Mead, who became her personal physician and all of her family members' personal physician until Mead died in 1895. Again, you guys, the physician's name was Euthanasia Mead. Really? Ugh. Anyway, Sarah and her caravan moved from Connecticut to California by carriage in 1886. By carriage, you guys. I suppose they were likely well armed and defended, judging from the connection to the Winchester Rifle Company. I'm sure they were armed. And considering that she was going to the Wild West with millions of dollars, there must have been like a whole motorcade of protection, I would have assumed. But upon arrival in what we now know as the Silicon Valley area of California, specifically the San Jose area, the house that would eventually be named Winchester Mystery House was purchased for $12,570 and was situated on a 45-acre ranch in the Santa Clara Valley. Sarah named the 8-room farmhouse and property Lanada Villa, since the area reminded her of Lanada Alavasa in Spain, a place she and her husband had visited 10 years earlier. At this property, Sarah was one of the first to grow fruit in the entire area. And for those of you not aware, California is a huge producer, now anyway, of many varieties of fruits, nuts, and varying plants and flowers. The house was located on a country lane named Santa Clara Los Gatos Road. Her initial plan was to build a house to accommodate her whole family. This never happened, partly due to the isolated location and partly due to the constant construction that was never ending and always ongoing day or night. The only family member to ever live with her was her niece Maria Daisy Merriman, who moved in when she was 21, and that was in 1890. Within the first 6 months, the house had increased in size from 8 rooms to 26 rooms. The gardens were filled with ornamental trees, shrubs, and flowers, and it is estimated that Sarah had plants from over 110 countries in the villa gardens. Sarah, now remember, she came from a woodworking family and shared a passion for architecture with her late husband. She chose to run the construction project herself, seeking the advice of carpenters that she hired. Her interest in architecture was evident by her subscription to journals including Architectural Record, a very popular architectural digest of the day. She did all the drawings and designs, but did not have like an overall plan. She worked room by room. If she was unhappy with the results, she would tear the section down and rebuild it or abandon it altogether for a while and return to work on it again later. The result? A rambling maze or labyrinth of a house, if you will. In 1896, Sarah added stories to the main 2-story home. In some areas, the home was 5 stories high, and she even added a 7-story tower that the San Jose newspaper said was rebuilt 16 times before Sarah was satisfied with it. She added state-of-the-art plumbing and electrical systems, which was crazy and unheard of and way ahead of her time for that era. Only the richest of the rich, the most affluent, could have indoor plumbing and electricity inside their home. Sarah had even built an indoor garden with an irrigation system that watered the plants and sloping floors that would channel the water to trap doors, which would then be piped to outdoor flower boxes. She installed an annunciator, is what they called it, a common early version of intercom to call servants. That way, they always knew which room she was in and how to find her in the maze. The construction of the home was often delayed or stopped for months at a time. This is a controversial assertion, though, because legend says that construction never stopped, not for a minute, day, night, 24/7, 365 days a year. You could hear the constructing, that she always had construction crews. She had a day crew and a night crew. They weren't allowed to talk to each other. Construction at never any point stopped, is what the legend says. But according to some records, she did often delay or stop for months at a time. It is said that she paid top dollar and double what anyone else would pay the carpenters and other workers that came in, and that she often gave them paid vacation of 3 to 6 months off, rotating out some teams for others to give them breaks and such. She focused on her construction project instead of giving in to the local rumors and insults. Side note here, there were many news articles and gossip columns about Sarah, as she was reclusive and out in the country building this monstrosity of a house. She rejected society and social calls. Even presidents were rejected visits. How scandalous. Despite the public ridicule and gossip and her seclusion, Sarah was very generous. She was known later as being the most charitable person of the time. Most donations by Winchester were done anonymously, only known by her lawyer, and only discovered after her death from letters and ledgers. She supported social causes, such as being on the finance committee supporting a celebration of California's 15th birthday in the year 1900, and being a paid member of a local chapter of the Red Cross. After the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, Sarah donated $150 to the San Jose Relief Fund, and she supported the, quote, Save the Redwoods campaign by donating $500. Her largest donations were to the tuberculosis ward in New Haven. Initially, Sarah donated $300,000 anonymously, and over a 10-year period, she donated over $1 million to the hospital, which opened on April 4th, 1918, as the William Wirt Winchester Hospital. Sarah was not well enough to attend the dedication ceremony, and the hospital became part of the Yale School of Medicine in 1948. Because most were unaware of her philanthropy, the press and those who did not know her well viewed her as miserly, reclusive, eccentric, strange, antisocial. But be that as it may, she did contribute hugely to the local economy in California, but also to our country as a whole. In 1893, Sarah's youngest sister, Estelle, became ill and died, adding to Sarah's already overwhelming loss of loved ones. And by 1903, Sarah's rheumatoid arthritis had disfigured her hands and feet, limiting her ability to walk and write. She started also losing her teeth and required dentures, which was quite the luxury at the time. It is unknown if Sarah was at Lanata Villa during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake that caused tremendous damage to the building and surrounding area. This is a point of contention in many of the folklore, legends, myths. Some accounts have her trapped in an attic room for a scary amount of time because the house was such a maze and there was so much rubble and destruction in parts of the house. and because of the damage from the quake, it made it almost impossible for crews to find her. And she was further traumatized by being trapped in her own home, while other accounts say that this was just a project hobby house and she wasn't even there at all during the quake. No one can really say for sure whether she was there or not. It depends on, which version of the folklore you believe. It wasn't until 1908 when there was the first mention of angry spirits haunting the Winchester house and Sarah herself, which appeared in the San Francisco Examiner, with rumors that she was considering selling the land and the house. These stories spread to encapsulate all her properties. The rumors stated that if she sold any, she believed she would die, and there were hints that she was involved in the occult. Rumors spread about Sarah Winchester's houseboat as well, stating that she had purchased the houseboat after the earthquake for fear of a biblical flood. The rumors painted her as mentally unstable, filled with superstition, guilt, and fear. But really, the truth of the matter is that she was just very business savvy and realized that real estate was a good investment, and she invested in a lot of properties for a lot of different reasons. By 1920, Winchester rarely left her home, shopping for clothing and material via mail order or having store employees bring her purchases out to her in her car. Sarah passed away in 1923, and within months, her project home had been turned into a tourist attraction, fed by rumors and her architectural eccentricity. Since the Winchester Mystery House opened as an attraction in 1923, the owners chose to embrace and expand upon the rumors, story, and gossip that had been in print, discussed by the community, and gossiped about for years. These stories have persisted and been written about extensively. Winchester is depicted as a superstitious, crazy woman instead of the innovative and intelligent person that she really was. She had an apparent love of the number 13, but there are many reports that support that these 13 chandeliers and 13 hooks in the bathroom, 13 wardrobes and rooms were all added after Winchester's death, not by Winchester herself, and that this number 13 obsession was never really hers. It was introduced to help support the rumors and commercialization of her home. Despite the claims that the house is the most haunted house in the United States, according to a paranormal investigator, Joe Nickel, there is no evidence that the Winchester Mystery House is haunted at all. Her staff, friends, and family were unhappy with the rumors surrounding Sarah Winchester and her house, and were distressed that Sarah's house had been turned into a haunted tourist attraction. So, there's kind of the facts that I could find about Sarah Winchester and her history and the history of the Winchester Mystery House. But what most of you know are probably the legends, folklore, and ghost stories. They even made a movie about them. In 2018, there was an hour and 40-minute movie in the horror fantasy category named Winchester, and it's described as fantastic, harrowing, and a psychological thriller. The excerpt reads, "The most haunted house in the world sits on an isolated stretch of land that's 50 miles outside San Francisco. Built by Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester fortune. It stands 7 stories tall and contains hundreds of rooms. To an outsider, it looks like a monstrous monument to a disturbed woman's madness. But Sarah's actually building a prison, an asylum for hundreds of vengeful ghosts, and the most terrifying among them have a score to settle with the Winchesters." There's also another movie, Haunting of the Winchester House, listed as a horror mystery in 2009, about an hour and a half long. The movie is described as a thrilling, mysterious, and horrific movie about a family who regrets moving into the Winchester house. and is a home for a mass of suitable spooky specters who take a disturbing interest in the family's daughter. Those are just a couple of the, I guess, major motion pictures or bigger productions that have come out of Hollywood surrounding the Winchester Mystery House and Sarah Winchester, the Winchester family, and all the ghost stories, lore, and legends that have come along with it. So, to conclude, I wanted to give you a nutshell of the timeline of Sarah Winchester's life, just so you kind of have it all in a nice, neat little package while you're thinking about what I've told you and maybe what you've heard, what you know, what you've seen, and come to your own conclusions on the matter. So the timeline is that in the summer of 1839, Sarah Pardee Winchester was born. And September 30th, 1862, at age 23, she was married to childhood family friend and neighbor William Wirt Winchester, who at the time was 25. Their marriage occurred during the height of the Civil War. On June 15th of 1866, Sarah gave birth to a baby girl that they named Annie Pardee Winchester in honor of William's late sister who had died during childbirth. But their child suffered from marasmus and died within a month of her birth. They then built their first house together, the 20,000 square foot marble ornate house with the circular drive and such. And then in June of 1869, Sarah's father died at the age of 60. They believe it was most likely from rheumatoid arthritis. And then in May of 1880, Sarah's mother died. In December of 1880, her father-in-law, Oliver, died. And in March of 1881, William, her husband, died. In 1884, Sarah's elder sister died of cancer. In 1886, she moved what was left of her family to California by carriage. Also in 1886, she purchased an old farmhouse and land outside of the San Francisco Bay Area in San Jose, when that area was all country and farmland, not yet invaded by urban population. And then in 1890, Sarah's niece moved in with her at the Winchester Mystery House. In 1893, Sarah's younger sister died from substance abuse, cirrhosis, after a devastating divorce from her husband. And as a side note, that sister's doctor was also Euthanasia Mead. Guys, I can't get over that. A doctor whose name is Euthanasia? If you don't know what euthanasia is, commonly known today is like when an animal gets sick and you have to put them down. That's euthanizing them. Euthanasia essentially means putting to death. Who named their kid Euthanasia? If she named herself and became a doctor, who would hire her as a doctor? Not me. I hope not you. Anyway, I just can't get over that. In 1901, Sarah did reject a presidential visit from President McKinley. He wanted to come stay at the home, and she rejected his, visit. And in 1903, she also rejected Teddy Roosevelt's request to visit her home. In 1903, she developed severe rheumatoid arthritis and was largely homebound at this point. And in 1906, the big one, earthquake, leveled much of the San Francisco area and devastated much of the Winchester Mystery House's construction. In 1908, rumors began to form, the myths and legends and ghost stories that we know today. In 1920, Sarah was severely homebound due to her health issues, and by 1923, Sarah Winchester had died, and in the same year, within months, her home had been turned into a haunted house, ghost story, tourist attraction for commercial use. And that, my friends, is the nutshell. That is the story of the Winchester Mystery House of San Jose, California, just outside San Francisco, and America's most haunted house. But is it really? And what do you guys think? What version of events do you think? Do you think that, Sarah was driven mad by so much loss and grief in her life and just started building this house nonstop, to reflect the madness in her mind? Did she fall prey to a self-purported psychic medium under one of the theories at the time that, the Winchester rifle, which, she had married into the family that created it. And so everyone was getting killed off by vengeful spirits, and she too was next if she didn't hide herself in this labyrinth or trap the ghosts in a labyrinth house, or do you think that maybe, just maybe, Sarah Winchester was grieving, but she was doing it the best way she could? She found a hobby that she enjoyed and just tried to live out the rest of her time with as much, I guess, fulfillment and peace and joy in a hobby, and just bide her time until she could be reunited with those that had gone before her, and really just kind of wanted to keep to herself. I can imagine that she didn't want to lose anyone else, and if you kind of keep to yourself, you don't form connections and you don't lose as many people, Let me know in the comments down below where you lie on the matter of the Winchester Mystery House. Haunted house? Crazy woman? Or just a sad, grieving, lonely, reclusive woman with an eccentric hobby? Let me know what you think of the whole thing in the comments down below. And now I'm afraid our time here is done. Our tale is over. And you may have survived this one, but will you survive the next? I guess we'll find out next week. See you then.